Hello, everyone. My name is Abigail Van Vliet, and this is my presentation on the Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test. My apologies for it being a voiceover. I couldn't quite get the video to work, but here we go. The Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test. This is an aptitude test that measures artistic talent through aesthetic judgment, which I will talk about later. Why I chose it. As I pursue a career in art therapy, I was immediately drawn to any assessment with the word art in it. I also remember taking an art aptitude test in grade school and the results coming back as highly gifted in visual art, and I wondered if this would be similar. After I looked it up, the structure and design was intriguing. Pairs of images where one is considered better than the other. Without seeing the test, I asked myself, who decided which judgments were better? What is aesthetic judgment anyway? And how does it measure artistic talent or predict your success in an art career? I also thought of a number of famous trend-setting artists like Salvador Dali and Andy Warhol, whose styles were considered wrong or ugly in the beginning. I wondered if they took the Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test, who would have failed and how would that have changed art today? So what is it? The Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test is an aptitude test, like I said, which means it aims to measure a person's natural ability to perform certain tasks and their potential to succeed in a certain area. Described by Meyer as an objective measure of art talent and designed to aid in the discovery of promising talent and the reduction of misdirected effort. For the history of development, starting in the beginning of the 20th century, art psychology was growing and psychologists and psychotherapists became more interested in the interdimensionality of individuals. The movement towards educational reform also influenced the increase in childhood psychological aptitude and achievement testing. After 6 years of development, the Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test was first published in 1929 by Norman C. Meyer and Carl E. Seashore under the University of Iowa's Psychology Department, Bureau of Educational Research and Service. It was revised in 1940 and renamed the Meyer Art Test 1 Art Judgment. The scoring manual was published 2 years later. The Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test and the Meyer Art Tests is considered an outdated format for psychological assessments, and because it had so many challenges with validity and reliability, it was later replaced with more accurate and effective assessments. The developers, Norman C. Meyer, born 1893 and died 1967, worked as an associate professor at the University of Iowa's Psychology Department between 1929 and 1939. He directed a research program called the Genetic Studies in Artistic Capacity. He was also known as one of the major proponents of the psychology of art and published several essays on the topic. Meyer's position, as he explains in 1933 introduction of the first volume of Studies in the Psychology of Art, was that aesthetic sensitivity, measurable through aesthetic qualities or principles of art, constitutes the most certain index to artistic capacity. Likewise, we discovered that cognitive capacity, as measured by intelligence testing, was linked to artistic success. Carl E. Seashore, born 1866 and died 1949, spent 1908 to 1937 at the University of Iowa as the Dean of the Graduate College and acted as Meyer's supervisor. Prior to working with Meyer on the Art Judgment Test, Seashore's research focused on aptitude and measuring musical talent, specifically pointing out the probabilities of success and non-success. I was surprised that both of these individuals spent nearly their entire adult lives studying creative art and psychology, both passing away within only a few years of their retirement. The purpose of administration. Directly from the abstract of their original study, the assessment was designed to aid in the discovery of promising talent and the reduction of misdirected effort. For Meyer and Seashore, the purpose of studying art psychology was to explore all of what makes up the art-talent complex and to identify the relationship between artistic skill and success, cognitive health, and intelligence. The Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test was used to study children's varying artistic abilities and promote academic and vocational success, specifically through visual art. Suggested populations. Meyer originally designed the assessment to be used with students in junior and high school who are interested in art careers, but it could easily be used with similar groups, including younger students, non-traditional students, non-student children and adolescents, individuals in vocational programs, and adults with intellectual or developmental delays. People in cognitive decline could potentially do the assessment to demonstrate their level of perception and aesthetic judgment, allowing psychologists to further study the correlation between artistic ability and cognition by seeing how these scores change over time. A person might be able to identify different shapes early on, but lose this ability throughout the progression of their condition. People with poor processing and judgment in math and language may still have strong aesthetic judgment as well. I worked with a young man with Down syndrome, profound autism, and intellectual delays, and though he had no capacity for math skills, for example, he could match colors. I imagine similar art judgment tests could be used to help determine what parts of the brain may be damaged or dysfunctional. Psychometric properties. In this test, subjects were asked to select the better, more pleasing, more artistic, more satisfying form from two pictures. The test booklet consisted of 125 pairs of pictures, each of which consisted of an image of recognized artistic merit and the same image altered to lower its artistic excellence. The aim was to identify the gifted child who shows evidence of manual skill, energy, aesthetic intelligence, perceptual facility, and creative imagination. Reliability, validity, test, retest, and inter-rater were all poor. One criticism of the test was that better was not scientifically determined. It was instead to be calibrated according to adult consensus, which they could not guarantee is objective. Meyer himself acknowledged that considerable work remains to be done in the computation of the coefficient of reliability, correlations with other factors such as intelligence and scholastic record, and the standardization and construction of norms. Directly from the study, it should not be presumed that a test of this kind affords a complete, final, quantitatively exact measure of art talent, but it does measure the critical factor, aesthetic judgment, which is basic and indispensable. Many people disagree with the end of this quote, however, which states, "With a high degree of it, aesthetic judgment, the individual may look forward to an art career with assurance. Without it, he should reconsider." While the Meyer-Seashore Art Judgment Test may show some measurable proficiencies in aesthetic judgment of a specific set of images, a significant argument for the test's discontinuation was the lack of validity and reliability, and that the outcome of the test should not and did not dictate who goes into artistic professions. Some cultural considerations. There were originally hundreds of pairs of images that were narrowed down to a still significant 125. The higher the volume and diversity of images in the test, the greater the cultural representation and accuracy of average scores. However, one of the primary considerations for the test was the type of images used, as pictures and symbols carry different meanings in different cultures. I had a guest presenter in one of my undergraduate art therapy classes named April Fitzpatrick, a licensed mental health counselor and board-certified art therapist, whose focus is in treating racial trauma through art therapy and community engagement. One of the theories she spoke about was the pineapple theory, which acknowledges the different meanings ascribed to images by different people. For those who see a pineapple as a valuable fruit with a rough exterior, the image could represent identity protection. For those who see a pineapple as a fruit that can only grow out of the crown of a dying one, the image could represent family values. For those who don't like the taste of pineapples, the image could represent something prickly and sour. This is to say that aesthetic correctness and recognized artistic merit of different images varies between individuals and cultures, as other cultures may have different aesthetic values. This may include realism versus imagination, bright colors versus neutral tones, religious interpretation versus personal expression, etc. Not only are there racial cultural considerations, but there are social cultural considerations as well, including socioeconomic status, geographical location, age, generation, religion, and upbringing. One child might determine an image to be better than its copy, and another child might determine that the copy is the better image if the children came from different walks of life with different cultural backgrounds and personal experiences. Other criticisms, whether cultural or otherwise, include the following. The test itself relied on visual ability and the clear printing of the images in a test booklet. It left no room for the consideration that people with visual impairment can still be professional artists. The images in the test booklets could easily be distorted through the printing process. These images and copied drawings often resembled etchings, which were already difficult to see when copied onto normal paper. If the purpose of the test was to determine a person's potential for success in an art career, the fact that there are blind and visually impaired professional artists challenges Myers and Seashore's theory that aesthetic judgment through visual perception was a determining factor for artistic talent. Not only were the images often printed unclearly and became increasingly outdated, the opinions of those who wrote the scoring manuals are almost a century old. Art changes, society's values in art changes, different movements create different forms of art, not all art is visual, and no determination can be justifiably made for what is ultimately correct or better. There is an increasing understanding of art psychology and the potential for artistic skills to indicate cognitive health, as well as other subfields of creative arts and psychology. However, art remains inherently subjective and therefore impossible to determine as correct or incorrect in terms of professional success. Modern aptitude tests for artistic talent include the combination of portfolio reviews, interviews, and skills-based evaluations that allow room for subjectivity. While aptitude tests focus on a person's potential success in a specific area, other assessments and many art therapy directives can also be used to measure aspects of artistic and creative development as it relates to cognitive health. Ultimately, the Myers-Seashore art judgment test could not be sustainable. It was a great first step in the building of additional research assessments aimed at determining the potential for success in a fine art career. Thank you guys for listening. I do hope that I can get this submitted and that everything works. Alrighty. Bye.